Welcome to the Sleeping Barber podcast.
Well, welcome to the Barber's Brief. Today we have V calling in from New York City.
Live from New York. That's got to be a thing.
That's pretty awesome. That's cool. You're at Adweek, right?
Yeah.
What's on tap at Adweek?
So much. It seems like there's a lot of sessions just on the NIL deals and how to kind of activate, I guess. And obviously there's an audience here for the most part. So it's really catered there, but there's a few good streams. I know Work was on the stage yesterday talking about efficiencies. Just a lot of different great content that take in, and I'll look to do a review for our listeners here in our next Barber's Brief and just kind of walk through some of my key learnings from attending Adweek.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, for anyone who hasn't listened to the Barber's Brief before, we use this as like a short format video podcast. Well, also audio podcasts in general.
Podcast.
To really just kind of focus on a couple of stories that caught our eyes in the last couple of weeks, highlight a marketing moment, which is a case study, and then we get into an ad of the week. Ad of the week. All right. Okay, so I'll go first, V. There's a post, we've had Tom Goodwin on before.
Yeah.
He's always got great stuff that he posts on LinkedIn. This week, or yesterday at least, it was just another great post from him. So I wanted to highlight this one. It was called The Big Dilemma in Advertising. And so it's nothing that we haven't really talked about before, but just the way he writes is so compelling and makes you really think. So the story that he outlined was, you've got campaign A. Someone walks in your office today with a campaign summary showing a 5.6 ROAS. They can show you every pixel click, every audience person reached. Tomorrow, someone will walk in your office with campaign B. And it's a video that makes you laugh, you feel good, reminds you how much fun your job is and how much you love doing what you do. But there's no ROI you can track with it.
Yeah, no.
So on one hand, you got this campaign A, which is you paid a lot of people to help you measure it. You've paid a lot of tech to help measure it. You know, due to ad fraud, that there's probably a lot of wasted spend there. You might not have even reached a single person, depending on where you put in these ads. You can't measure the impact of offline sales. And most likely that ROI or the ROAS that they're talking about isn't incremental. So then you got the campaign B, which is, it's the right thing to do, but all you've got is like, really trust me.
The best type of credibility you can have.
Yeah. And so naturally you're pulled towards doing more of A. But the debate shouldn't be about A versus B, but about having the courage to do what's right. And so that's the dilemma that he's kind of focusing on. And there's a ton of good conversation and comments in the thread below that. So I just thought it was such an interesting, it was such a real thing, really, to summarize a lot of the challenges that marketers have.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to why a lot of us continue to go back to the well that we know it is the perception of this still working. When you think about like performance marketing and why it's still so popular, is because you can have something in a short amount of time to present, to kind of sell a case, to say, yeah, this is working. But in actuality, it may not be doing what you need it to do, but you're hiding behind some KPIs or some benchmarks that the industry is kind of imposed versus it actually driving the impact that you need from the campaign. So anyways.
Yeah. What do you got?
So I asked to sell attention data to publishers. I got this from the marketing brew earlier, late last night. So the ad verification and brand safety company last Thursday unveiled an attention tool that says publishers can use to better sell their advertising inventory. So when you think about, like, there's a shift in a lot of our data pool sets, we're being impacted by the cookies, the cookieless world. Publishers need to make sure to showcase how great their inventory actually is. So obviously, quality attention. This tool called Quality Attention for Publishers uses machine learning to gauge how much attention the readers might have on any certain web page.
Mm-hmm.
So it will be available to publishers and also supply side platforms, so SSPs. that sell publisher inventory programmatically and will allow them to essentially demonstrate that inventory quality, and hence their ad effectiveness, and again, at the very least, optimize user engagement. So this is all based on IS. So for me, just a couple quick things. So what to consider, obviously attention metrics, which aim to really kind of estimate that quality of the content adjacent to any sort of ad inventory, has become one of the most important things for advertisers. And it would take us shift us a little bit away from more of those traditional metrics like viewability that we used to have. A lot of marketers still use like bounce rates to monitor and showcase like, hey, are people genuinely engaged in this content or not? But I think it will give us another metric to really look at. But I think it's really important not to forget that publishers have actually been uneasy about any relation with verification companies, with some claiming that these companies, what they do is they unfairly scrape their websites and then sell the data back to them. So it's one of those things where it sounds great on the one hand. I feel like the industry will go there, but it's going to be interesting how that progresses.
Well, also there's the other side of that too, which is there's some mediums that are meant to not have a lot of attention, like billboards, but they do generate a lot of impact if you use them properly. So there's it's interesting thinking about the focus on attention. And I know we should look for Karen Nelson Field at some point to come on.
Yeah, we should definitely bring Karen on.
Yeah. But I know that's one of the counterpoints to that attention metric is that there are some types of mediums that you don't need a long attention for them to work.
Great point.
Interesting.
Yeah. More data.
Yeah. Speaking of data.
What do you got?
How about the 80-20 rule?
Never heard of
it. Also known as Pareto's Law. So that's the general idea behind Pareto's Law is 80% of your business comes from 20% of your customers. Or 80% of anything comes from a small portion. So in the Ehrenberg Bass Institute textbooks and all kinds of stuff, in reports and publishings and books that they've had, they've refuted the 80-20 rule quite a lot.
Yeah.
So this guy, Andreas Wallin, I think he works in an agency somewhere in Sweden. He's like, well, let me just see if I can figure this out with my own clients. So what he found was he had a few clients, one in the pasta category, one in the cereal and muesli category, one in the baking products category. And so what he found is that over 12 months, the purchase, like the volume, the 20% of the sales volume in pasta came from 56% of customers. The 20% volume came from 61% of customers in the cereal category. And then in the baking products, also just a little over 50%. So the implication there is that for big brands, especially, if you think about only focusing on your category or your heavy category buyers or your loyal customers, you're probably missing out on a huge portion of your revenue opportunity. Because you're talking about like 40 to 60% or 50 to 60% of the customers aren't heavy buyers. And then for small brands, it gets even bigger. The numbers are more like 90% of their customer base are occasional or light buyers.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, there's huge implications to drive long-term growth with this. So reaching as many people as you can is really important. Maintaining visibility is important. The distinctiveness is important because also those light buyers become heavy buyers later. And the heavy buyers today become light buyers or non-buyers.
Sure.
So people don't stay in their lanes, so to speak, and follow an 80-20 rule. At least in consumer packaged goods, which is, and then B2C brands in general is what all the Ehrenberg Bass stuff had looked at. So yeah, he validated their findings.
I mean, I remember I used it in one of our earlier podcasts during season 1.
Yeah.
Can you believe that we're approaching like season 4?
I know.
Anyways,
it's crazy.
It's crazy. But I remember I brought that up on one of the episodes, and in that moment, you corrected me. It's like, actually, that's one of those like marketing, and I didn't know that at the time. This is not a factual, and there's so many of these little laws that we often just regurgitate because that's what we've heard. So the fact that there's more and more data to suggest like the 80/20 does not exist, it's not a thing. It's just great to kind of serve as a reminder. Don't just make sure you're double checking your facts before you start using them. So yeah, that's good.
Yeah. You got another one.
I got another one. So I'm knee deep. I don't know if I've been just because of what's happening out generally, not only at work, but like obviously privacy laws are consistently just putting a lot of pressure on how you use a lot of the data. So there was a great, almost like survey that was done. It was written about on Marketing Dive, but essentially it's like the state of privacy in advertising found that 88% of advertisers believe privacy laws will impact personalized targeting. Now, well, I'll run through a few more stats here, but like we think about with the rise of data privacy laws, such as the GDPR that's in Europe and the California Consumer Privacy Act, the CCPA in the US. Obviously, in Canada, also have CASL. We have also what was it, law? Oh my goodness, the one in Quebec.
C51.
C54?
Yeah, something
51,
like that.
54, I don't remember exactly. But these things are a thing. So obviously, most advertisers believe audience targeting will be the most affected by privacy laws. The number two thing that most concerns is like measured and validation. So we know how important measurement is, especially in our space. Obviously, there's this notion that it will be impacted on the way we're able to measure efficiently, but it's less about the creative personalization, because I think we're seeing a shift away from that. That's not really a thing that we should be trying to do, at least not in paid formats. Email, one-to-one, SMS, I think that's a different equation. But I thought it was interesting because there's a couple more tidbits here. So when we think about like the future, there's questions around like the future of data compliance. So approximately 40% of the respondents reported limited audience data available in select regions, while 38 reported difficulty in keeping up with implications of each new law. So it goes to speak to how dynamic this space really is. And because the dust really hasn't settled yet, it's hard for advertisers to know which direction they need to go. And just finally, 59% of those who reevaluated their data sets ensure that they comply, and over a quarter, or 28% of respondents invested in new tech to help them with this new direction. So like data clean rooms as being the primary example of that. So I don't know. For me, it's just one of those things. You got to stay as close as possible to it. It is changing. Obviously, look at what your region, your country is really kind of focused on, but it just goes back to like, how do you nurture your first party data the best of your ability, because this landscape's not going to be the same in 5 years.
Yeah. Well, also there's this other stat. I don't think I heard you say this, but I'm just reading it. 31% of advertisers are experiencing an increase in cost due to changing privacy laws.
Yeah.
So it's funny when you think about this in the sense of, we just heard the Capero guys talking about media costs and everything last week. And it was interesting because now I'm looking at this going, okay, so your tech costs are going up. Your efficiency costs are going down. So it's costing you more to deliver stuff. And you're doing mass customization, mass personalization of content production. You're producing more. So it's more. Yeah. And it's eroding your media budget.
Totally.
And so you're reaching less and less people. But we just said it's really important to reach a lot of people. So it's kind of like, to what end? Like, it might not be responsible to try and do any of these kinds of things. And not to keep up with privacy. I'm saying keep up with privacy, but maybe it's not necessary to do all these one-to-one things we think are so important.
Well, if you think of some of these MarTech stacks, so I know Adobe Audience Manager as an example. I'm not picking on Adobe right here, but a lot of them are cookie-based audience pools. But when you think about the deprecation of the cookie and the consent banners and stuff like that, the moment consumers have a choice to accept or reject cookies, it's not about Google basically saying, we're going to deprecate that third-party cookie. The consumer is going to deprecate it on its own, which makes those audiences that were being built based off cookies completely redundant. Like they just don't work. You don't have great match rates when you're pushing it back into platforms. Yeah. So the cost of personalization on the open web will likely turn into this thing where it's not even efficient, or should you be looking at it that way, and you're prioritizing high reach tactics instead.
Yeah.
And that could just be a choice you have to make.
Yeah.
which is not terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways,
Well, I have a marketing moment for us, V. And it kind of relates to this a little bit, actually. Well, it relates to a lot of things we've talked about. So last night, I believe this is in UK, at the IPA Effectiveness Awards, Adam and Eve, of which Adam and Eve DDB, which is where Les Binet works, they won Effectiveness Company of the Year, and then with this campaign that they did with McCain French fries, what they call it, chips, in the UK.
Gotta
they
love me
won
some chips.
the Grand Prix, the Effectiveness Awards Grand Prix last night.
Nice.
So this is clever. When the chips are down, margins matter, is what the headline is. So okay, I'll set the stage here on this case study. So in 2008, there's this global housing crisis, right? Markets crash. There's a recession. Families are looking to save money. In the UK, much like anywhere else, the products were becoming commoditized. There's this rise happening in discount or low cost grocers and anything else in any other category. In the UK, it's Aldi and Lidl, that we're starting to also take private label stuff and replace all of the McCain and other products on their own shelves with their own lower cost products, and so driving revenue and margin for themselves, but cutting out other brands like McCain.
Right. Yeah.
So that started happening around 2008, 2015. So just about 7 years later. By that point, 50% of all frozen French fries sold in the UK were private label. McCain's revenue was on decline. Generic search for oven chips was bigger than people were searching for oven chips more than they were searching for McCain French fries or McCain chips. Yeah. So McCain hires Adam and Eve DDB in 2014. So the year before I was claiming those stats for. In 2015, they launched a campaign together that focused on balancing long-term brand building with activation. And specifically with the with the brand building campaign, what they were trying to do was focus on growing sales profitably. So they were chasing profitability fee.
There must be listeners of the podcast. There's no other way to explain it.
No, there's no. You're 100% right. So they're focusing on these two things. So in 2015, they launched this campaign under this platform that they call Joyful Reality. And what it was is that there's a lot of campaigns like anywhere you look that focus on sort of, I would call it stock imagery or stock assets, stock videos, where it's like these unrealistic families and perfect scenarios and perfect lives and perfect, doing perfect things with perfect kids and all that. And so they shifted away from that because they found that consumers found them unrelatable. So they were targeting families, specifically moms of real British families at tea time. And they then use these families in their campaigns for a period of 9 years. So they committed to this platform.
Holy smokes.
Yeah, there's a hyperlink in here that we'll have for the YouTube video that shows this. There's also a screenshot here of one of the families that they featured. So what happened in this period of time? So price elasticity, I had to look this up. So this is one of the ways to measure profitability. So what price elasticity means is that if a price change creates a change in demand, that's known as elastic demand. Meaning, if you increase your price, this is one of the economics things we learned I kind of learned somewhat a little bit in the MBA. You increase price, you generally decrease volume.
Right. And
so if a price, and on a scale, price elasticity is usually measured from 0 to +1. So price elasticity, if it's 1, that means it's exactly it's elastic. So if a price elasticity is 0, it means it's inelastic. So it means that no matter how much the price changes, it doesn't change demand when it's 0.
Okay.
Right? So what happened was, over the 9-year period of this campaign, price elasticity fell by 47%. So it approached It was getting closer and closer to zero, meaning as they were increasing prices, it didn't change demand. So they could maintain sales volume as they were increasing price over a 9-year period, and it was incremental. And so they had a profit ROI for 1.5 pounds for every dollar invested. Net profit increased by 26 million Great British pounds, which is about 46 million Canadian, and net sales increased by 44%. So they did this huge successful impact of the campaign over a long period of time. So this is not like a matter 9 years. This is not like a small sample size of like, oh, we drove a spike in sales this weekend. This is a 9-year commitment to this campaign.
Holy smokes. Could you imagine coming into that company in like, say, mid-form? It's like, hey, we already have the marketing campaign. We're already live. It'd just be such a weird environment to operate in. I'm sure like there's optimizations, maybe some refreshes that kind of happened over that 9-year platform that they created. But that's taking, there must be a CMO over there, that's for sure, to make a decision like that.
Yeah. And I mean, it's a really interesting fact because they were getting improvements in price elasticity year over year, but over a 9-year period, it was like a 47% drop.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So price elasticity started at 1 and it went down to 0.53, which is pretty awesome. So it's an interesting way to measure campaign impact, right? Like we talk about profit all the time, but there is a way to do that. At least in CPG, it's pretty simple not simple, but it's somewhat straightforward to measure this kind of thing.
It's a great idea, actually. Like how does your price impact essentially like your favorability over a long period of time?
Yeah.
I like it.
So they turned the ship around.
Of course they did.
Yeah.
Committed some 9 years. There you go.
Yeah. You got out of the week.
I did have out of the week, and I wanted to bring up a controversial one. I don't know. Yeah. That's what we do here on the Sleeping Barber.
That's all we do. Controversy.
So you probably would have saw this hit your LinkedIn feed as well. So, there was this study that was done that mothers eat burgers in an up close and personal. Sorry, they eat burgers when they are after they've delivered a kid.
Oh yeah. I have seen these ads. Yeah.
So Burger King being Burger King, we call this campaign "Bundles of Joy," where Burger King is celebrating the moment after birth where mothers can kind of tuck into some food. So this was created, it's an out-of-home campaign, and it was created by BBH London. That campaign draws inspiration from that survey conducted by Misled on behalf of Burger King UK, which polled over 2,000 moms, revealed that their first meal after childbirth stands out as an exceptional for many. And notable 39% of respondents said their post-birth food felt like the ultimate version of that meal. So the print ads, or these out-of-home ads, really celebrated that moment with mothers holding their babies, but also, having a burger.
Yeah.
So obviously this created controversy. Yours complained that the ad, while clever, was encouraging unhealthy eating habits, which I could appreciate that. It's the views or the images are somewhat unsettling. After childbirth, moms need nutrients. Others argue that they shouldn't be eating just burgers.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, I thought it was great. The fact that it got the community talking, I thought it was a great execution, and it came from an insight. So we talk about research all the time here on this podcast. So can't fault them for leaning into an insight like that.
Yeah.
But definitely a creative way of going about this.
Yeah. Yeah, to me, it seems like, without knowing what the brief was, my hunch is the brief was do something that's going to catch people's attention and create buzz. That's
the one thing Burger King does, right? They think about the moldy Whopper. You think about like how they go after McDonald's. Like it's like what they do. Does it translate into sales? I mean, I don't think so.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I don't work for Burger King, so I don't know. the nuances.
I did see that though in my feed. You're right, on a couple of LinkedIn posts. I was like, "What is this?"
It's such a polarizing topic as well. I don't know if you noticed. I know Will Posket. He wrote. I think it was against it. There's a few that wrote for it. So
Yeah,
the community is divided.
yeah.
What's your take?
Controversy. I mean, for me, like, I
Not to put you on the spot there, Mark.
well, because I keep thinking about category entry points. So by putting like, there's a lot of good things that you could argue for this campaign. But if you're looking at sales driving revenue, I don't know that's going to relate with that many people. So you're alienated you're spending a ton of money on media probably on a campaign that's alienating a lot of people.
Yeah.
So I don't know, like, that's why I was saying I think the brief might have been to go for buzz.
Yeah, probably.
Right. But if you're going after something like, well, McCain, we just talked about, like, category entry point is for French fries is making dinner.
Yeah. That's a great point.
For a family. And so like, that's a lot of people that do that for their families. And so making it relatable. Whereas this is not necessarily relatable for a lot of people. Fair. And so that's where I kind of think it's probably not going to deliver much in terms of revenue.
It's weird.
But maybe that's not the goal.
Yeah, and I don't know. Maybe it's a campaign for marketers. I don't know. Is it going to resonate with consumers the same way? I think there is a shock effect that kind of plays into it. So that could help in building some of that stickiness or that mental availability, perhaps. But yeah, anyways, I thought it was an interesting one. Like I said, the community's divided on it. And it's good to see the creativity still lives on.
Yeah.
So coming up next week, what do we have?
Well, we've got Omar Ruby coming up next week.
Omar, amazing.
So this is I don't know if it's quite annual, but not with Omar, but having an accountant on.
Yeah, no kidding,
to help us understand accounting language, business language. Yeah. It was a really cool conversation. We had some really big ahas, I think, for both of us. So yeah, Omar's coming on. Well, he's not live, but we recorded this before, and we're going to publish this next week. It was really great.
It was great. It was really great, and Omar was a great guest, and there's a lot of great little tidbits that we can take away.
Yeah, totally, including LumiQ, which is where I've discovered him.
That's right.
It's a great platform, a really great podcast for anyone that wants to look at it.
Yep.
Okay, with that, V.
Well, I got 3 floors of profitability I can go visit. I don't know about you, man, what's happening. But
well, let me know what the exchange rate is on that profitability, where you're at, because I'm curious to hear.
I love it.
Yeah. All right, we'll have fun in New York.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I wish you were here, buddy. It would have been fun to do this together. But
yeah, that would have been good. Next time, one of these times, we're going to figure this out.
We're going to go to con next year. That's what we're putting it out there.
Put it out in the universe. Let's put up a vision board.
We're going to Canes. See, I even forget con Canes. Anyways, whatever. We're making it happen.
Let's do it. All right, buddy. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, man. Take care.